Hello, this is Dread from Epic Builds. And in today's video topic, we're going to be going over a different topic today. So normally this is when I should be putting out a video about how Tencent has taken a stake in EHG, but instead of making something like that, I'm going to make something actually useful for the community. And we're actually going to talk about T4 Julra farming instead. So, I had recently played in the Vision GL hardcore, Vision GL tourney, like the softcore tourney. I started a few days ago, and I had been playing this character for about 2 days at the making of this footage, and I was able to go from from nothing all the way to T4 Jurla. And that has taught me a lot of things about what makes a build T4 Jurla, viable, and what are the kind of things you need to be worrying about when you're doing said, content. So the first thing, obviously, you're gonna need damage, right? The first thing off, we're gonna talk about you're gonna need damage. Generally, around I found 300 to 400k usually keeps it close to 2 to 3 minutes. Obviously, more is better, but that's like the minimum. And for a 2 day existence of a character like this build was, 200 to 300k was pretty realistic, right? Like with Hammer Throw Nova. To be honest, this is nowhere near as much damage as you can get with these kind of setups, but I wanted to utilize a shield because I was, pushing arena. So obviously having about like 200, 300k DPS is like a good mark to begin this. Now, other things I have found that are very useful. Armor. Armor is your best friend. So in this footage, I am not utilizing a Throne of Ambition, which, if you don't know, it is a unique idol that gives you like 20% armor per stack and leads up all the way to 200%. And that is insanely strong on bosses and rares and such, because one of the biggest problems is scaling armor on a singular target, and this pretty much does that. We have a lot of flat armor thanks to a lot of different sources, and Throne of Ambition is just a bunch of increased damage. So in most situations, you just need to get your Throne of Ambition. You just need increased armor, which Throne of Ambition covers. The beautiful thing is a lot of different characters, even at like a measly 800 armor, which is not that hard to get flat. If you get 200% increased armor, that goes up to 2400 armor, which is already 40% DR, right? For physical, and then of course like 30% for like other attacks. That's already a large amount of DR just from putting in Throne of Ambition. That's without anything else. Most characters get up to 800 flat armor, and just putting in a Throne of Ambition just makes you so much tankier versus bosses, and it's absolutely insane for just a one slot unique. Now, this build does not use a Throne of Ambition, at least the current in this video. I did not go and farm one. Obviously, it'd be a really good idea because most of my damage is fire damage. It would give me a lot more damage, but I didn't even use a Throne of Ambition. The only unique I had was a legendary pair of Laraka's Claws with like throwing attack speed, which in my opinion could be replaced if you just had better gear than I had. Uh, but yeah, armor. Armor very important. Armor is your best friend against T4 Julra because the more DR, the better. I am avoiding these cold waves you see here. I'm avoiding a lot of these attacks, but you actually don't need to avoid the cold wave as long as you have enough crit avoid. That's the second thing I'm going to talk about. What I've noticed with a lot of these boss attacks is they have a very, very large amount to crit. So, for instance, I had 93% crit avoidance here in this footage when I was doing my T4 Jurla farming to push for arena. And even at 93%, I still did not feel safe because of how much crit chance these guys have. I think they have close to 100%, if not 100% crit chance with all of their attacks. So critical strike avoidance capping is a 100% must. Like 100%, right? Right there, that was a crit. I have 93% crit avoid. That was not a crit. You see the difference there? Like, it's insane the difference between having capped crit avoid and not having capped crit avoid. So having capped crit avoid is the next thing you need to make sure you have for just general T4 Jirla farming, because I believe most characters can actually do T4 Jirla with enough investment and enough, work put into it. But you need to follow these few rules, like getting enough damage so the fight doesn't last long. Generally, I found if the fight lasts longer than 3 minutes, you see those void pools. So what happens is every single time you change over to avoid her big blast, she will plop down a void pool, and the longer the fight goes on, the more void pool she will plop down. And of course, eventually you get to the point where there's so many void pools that you just can't deal with it, right? Much like the Shaper fight or Maven fight from Path of Exile. So you want to stay within that 4 minute window. Anything more than 3 to 4 minutes is very bad because it just takes too long and you just simply get killed by the pools. This is a metric used by EHG for people who would just want to play like a ZDBS build and just kind of like just sit through everything. This is their metric. Now, oh, now the next step is actually in a conversation that Perry and I had. He was on stream. We were helping someone with T4 Jirla farming, a viewer, and he was having problems farming T4 Jirla. He's like, well, I've invested so much in my character. I feel very tanky and monolith. Why am I not T4 Jirla viable? And then he told us he was a marksman. Well, the problem is Glancing Blow is very strong against Jirla herself, right? As long as you have capped Glancing Blow, right? Because any amount of chance for failure is enough to end your run instantly, right? And you don't want to be ending your run like that. But of course, Glancing Blow is really strong. But Dodge, on the other hand, is not, because there are certain effects like the Cold Seeking Bolt that she shoots out that will, of course, avoid dodge, and all of her void pools will avoid dodge too. So if you have 2k life as a marksman, right, and you are focusing on dodge and glancing blow, when you swap over for the explosion and you see like the dot pool ticking me down, I'll show you right here. So I'm gonna wait for the dot pool, right? You see how I took like half my life from the dot pool? If you're a marksman, you would have been dead because you would not have had the same amount of DR that I had, because all of your DR is hit based with dodge and glancing blow. This pretty much makes it so marksman is by far one of the worst, if not the worst mastery in general to take T4 Jirla farming. Don't get me wrong, you can still do it with enough effort and enough work put in, but general marksman builds that build dodge and glancing blows suck against T4 Jirla because of these dot pools, because your actual EHP versus dots is going to be much less because there's not many builds in the game that, work well against dots, and this is one of them, right? So overall, don't play marksman if you want to farm T4 Jirla. I would just suggest playing any other mastery because all the other masteries have ways of dealing with it, except for marksman, because marksman, of course, is based on glancing blow and dodge, which are, of course, the worst defenses to be running in T4 Jirla because of how much it doesn't affect everything, right? Obviously, armor is good because armor is cheap to build, while glancing blow is expensive, right? You can get like 40k for 40% armor pretty easily, right? But getting like capped glancing blow, right, is very hard. Getting like 70% dodge is very hard. So builds that have to invest into that stuff, right, are not going to do as well. There are a few exceptions. Now, how do you deal with melee? Melee. Well, contrary to popular belief, Jirla is not impossible to do as a melee build. She is almost near impossible. She's not impossible. So, for instance, I'm going to show you here in this footage. You see how I move to the other side of the arena? Now, as Jirla, her AI, when she comes back, she will come walk towards you. So, if she's on one side of the arena, right, pretend she's on the other side of the arena, right? You want to go to the other side when she does her big explosion, and you will pull her closer to the middle, and she will stay within that little ring there because of her AI, because that's her range of attack. So you have to kind of like manipulate her AI somewhat, meaning like you have to pull her, right? And so a good metric is, you see that little the little circle, right? The circle there, I'm like pointing at it, I'm being dumb. This circle here, right? This circle where where like the damage, like the, because the problem is you gotta like stay in this channel, right? Well, if you stay within that circle and you keep her in that circle, you'll do fine. Now, obviously, you need to be aware of her position every single time you swap over and make sure she is within melee range for you. Now, characters that have pull, specifically Rive and Warcry, Warcry is very good for this, for Primalist mains. Because you can spec into the pull and pull her into melee range, so you don't have to deal with the dot pools and stuff like that, which is very neat and makes a lot of primalist melee builds like Surf and Strike and Swipe a lot more viable for T4 Julra than, let's say, like some Sentinel ones like Warpath, because you can pull her into the AoE. But it's obviously not the easiest thing in the world, but it's not impossible with the right mechanics. Uh, and other than that, there's not really anything else. Just really overall, just if you can't do T4 Drilla, make sure you have enough armor. Make sure your crit avoid capped. Make sure you have enough damage, because if you have like 100k DPS on the dummy, you are not going to be able to do T4 Drilla in the same amount of time you need to, right? And of course, don't build dodge if you want a farmer. Don't build glancing blow if you want a farmer. Damage over time reduction is very, very strong. It is like one of the strongest things against Jurla. Like for instance, Druid has a node at the top of his tree that gives you 24% less damage over time taken. Forge Guard has 30% less damage over time taken at the top of its tree. You could run a pair of Ravenous Voids, which gives you less void damage taken, less damage taken. Generic less damage taken modifiers works on her as well. I'm not entirely sure if Bastion's less damage taken from nearby enemies affects her. I don't know if that actually affects her or not, affects the dot pools. I'm not entirely sure. You'd have to, I'd have to look that up. But other than that, you generally want flat DR. So Mage is very good at this as well, because it converts a lot of its void into fire thanks to like Orion's Eye, and then it reduces that damage with Prism Wraps and stuff. That's another build that's very good at it, because having dot DR versus hit DR is very big, because dot DR allows you to not have to worry about dying to those dot pools. Because the problem is, if you're doing the fight correctly and you're not like bugging her out, which will be fixed eventually, you're not like flipping the things like that, she will put a void pool, and you will have to sit in that void pool for at least a half second. And if your build can't survive for that half second, right, then you're gonna die, right? So dot dr is very important as well. But I hope that that made sense. I hope that seeing me do T4 Durla within like 2 days of a character's existence, sure, it's not the fastest kill in the world, but it is one of the cheaper ones. And the build guide for this will be out soon, probably when the patch comes around, because, or probably today or tomorrow. Well, probably tomorrow. Well, with all that being said, thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful rest of the day wherever you're at, and bye, guys.